So today I'm going to do a quick run through on the C300. We've got front disc brakes that are going to be replaced. We're going to do pads and rotors. So let me get started on that. Okay, so I'm starting on the driver's side. This side doesn't have the wear sensor, so when we get to that, I'll go through that on the passenger side. So right now we have two bolts on the back side of the caliper, these heads here and one down here. Both those need to be loosened up. They're 13 millimeter. There's also a nut here and you're gonna have to hold on to that. My wrenches are a little too wide to fit it, so I'm gonna use this vice grip and grab onto it just to keep it from spinning around. So once you got those two caliper bolts out of the way, you can use a large screwdriver. Just put it between the caliper bracket right here and the caliper itself, and just pry it from the top and pry it from the bottom, and then it'll just come right off. So with the caliper off, you can now see the caliper bracket here. That's the next thing we're going to have to take off. So I have an 18 millimeter socket on the top bolt holding the caliper bracket on, and then the other one is right down here. These are usually on there pretty good, so I have a pipe that I put on here to extend my leverage, and the wheel is turned to the right, which also gives me room to not hit the car here when I go ahead and loosen that up. So do that for the top and bottom, and then we should be able to take the caliper bracket off. So now that the bolts are out, the caliper bracket will just come off, and then go ahead and knock the pads out of there, and then take these little clips out too. You should get new clips when you get your pads. And then the next thing we've got to do is take the rotor off, because we're changing those also. So there's a little Torx screw here, set screw holding that in place. So we'll go ahead and figure out what that is and loosen it up. So that Torx set screw was a T30, so I went ahead and loosened that up. You probably have to stick a screwdriver through the lug hole to keep the rotor from spinning. My set screw was on there tight enough that it was continuing to spin the rotor. So the next step is to go ahead and get the rotor off. So usually a dead blow hammer is good. Just hit all around, and it's going to take a little work, but eventually that'll loosen up from the hub, and then we'll be ready to replace it. So now that I got that rotor knocked off, we go ahead and just reverse the process. So I got these Zimmerman Z-coated rotors and these Akebono pads that I'm going to install. And everything that I got here came from FCP Euro. So before I put these on, I'm just going to hit it with some brake cleaner, both sides of the rotor, just to make sure we don't get any debris in there and have any squeaking issues. Something I also like to do is put some anti-seize inside the rotor to make it a little bit easier next time the brakes need to be changed. So that'll give me a little bit of protection against rust between the inside of the rotor and the hub for the next time you've got to use a dead blow hammer to smack that rotor right off. So go ahead and put the rotor on, and then take your T30 Torx bit and make sure you put that set screw back in that holds the rotor in place. So now we'll put the caliper bracket on. I've put these brake pad clips in place. They just press in. You can replace the old ones, probably a good idea. They should come with your brake pads. And then we'll go ahead and we'll get this right back on here. And again, you've got a bottom and a top 18 millimeter caliper bracket bolt to tighten down. Now that we got the caliper bracket on, I also just put the pads in, and they just slide into the grooves at the top and bottom. So you got that for the front and the back. So the next thing you want to do is go ahead and take the caliper, and you got to depress this piston into the housing. So using one of the old brake pads, you just put it over the front of the piston, and then you can take a fairly large C-clamp and go ahead, and there's a little ear here you might be able to use, and go ahead and start twisting in your C-clamp, and that should start moving this piston in. So I'm not going to use a C-clamp. I actually have a kit that actually is used to push in the brake caliper into the housing. Bought this a while ago on Amazon, because some calipers you have to actually twist and turn. This particular one on this C300, you just have to push it in. But this tool is definitely easier than trying to figure out where to mount the C-clamp. Alright, so once that caliper is depressed back into the housing, you can go ahead and take your caliper and line it back up over the pads. And then you got your two bolts, one at the top and one at the bottom, that you'll just have to go ahead and tighten up. So we'll get those tightened up, and we'll move on to the next step. So now our caliper's tightened down. Don't forget, you got that nut right there that you're going to want to grab onto. If you got lower profile wrenches, you can use that. I use this vice grip to help me. But once you get that tightened down, then you're good to go to put your tire back on, and then do the other side. So I'll show you about the wear sensor too. The wear sensor on the other side will be connected in here, and just has an electrical connector as well that just plugs in. Okay, so here we are on the passenger side, and this is the wear sensor that I was talking about. So it plugs in here into this housing, and it also just slides right into the brake pad. So you can pull it out, wiggle it a bit, and it'll come out, and then you can just pull it out of the housing here. And then when you get everything back together, you just go ahead and plug it in here and push it right in there, and then you'll be all set with your new wear sensor. So here's a shot of the passenger side all done. We've got our wear sensor in place, and we've got our new rotor and our new pads on. These original calipers are TRW. There's a TRW stamp on the caliper, and there's a TRW stamp on the caliper bracket. So TRW pads, another option. I just opted for the Akabona pads this time. That's it. So just put the tire on and you're all set.